Valentine's Day is known for roses, chocolates, and romantic dinners. But not every love story ends with a kiss under candlelight. Some are sealed in screams, shadows, and unspeakable terror. What if behind those loving eyes lurked a secret so dark it could turn your sweetest day into your worst nightmare? Tonight, we're diving deep into 3 scary true Valentine's Day horror stories, all based on chilling real events that will make you question everything about February 14th. Make sure you're alone and the lights are low, because these tales aren't for the faint of heart. Let's begin. But for some, that trust is a mistake. For some, the knock on the door isn't a delivery of flowers. The secret admirer isn't a shy suitor. And the perfect match online is the architect of a perfect nightmare. What happens when the day of love becomes a day of absolute terror? Today, we're not telling tales of fiction. We're exploring 3 chilling, true stories where the crimson of a Valentine's rose was overshadowed by a much, much darker red. Our first story begins not with a scream, but with a simple, anonymous gift. It's a story about a woman named Amelia, a graphic designer living a quiet life in a bustling city. She'd been single for about a year, and while she wasn't actively looking for a relationship, the upcoming Valentine's season always made her feel a little bit lonely. It was February 7th, exactly 1 week before Valentine's Day, when the first one arrived. Tucked under the windshield wiper of her car was a small, exquisitely wrapped box. No note, no name, just a single perfect piece of dark chocolate truffle inside. She was a little weirded out, but also intrigued. She mentioned it to her friends at work. One of them, Sarah, thought it was incredibly romantic. A secret admirer. 2 days later, another gift. This time, it was left on the doorstep of her 3rd-floor apartment. A single, long-stemmed white rose. Again, no note. Now, Amelia was starting to feel uneasy. How did they know which car was hers? And more importantly, how did they get into her secure apartment building to leave something right at her door? She pushed the thought away, telling herself maybe they just followed another resident in. It was a flimsy excuse, and she knew it. The gifts continued every other day. A small book of poetry by her favorite author. A coffee mug from a tiny, independent cafe she'd visited only once, weeks ago. Each gift was more personal, more specific. The romantic intrigue she first felt was curdling into a cold, persistent dread. This person didn't just admire her from afar. They were watching her. They knew her routine, her tastes, her movements. The feeling of being desired was replaced by the terrifying feeling of being monitored. Her friends were now divided. Sarah still held out hope it was a grand, romantic gesture. But her other friend, Ben, was deeply concerned. "Amelia, this isn't romantic, it's stalking," he told her over the phone. "They know where you live, where you park, what you like. This is a massive invasion of privacy." Valentine's Day finally arrived. Amelia spent the whole day on edge, jumping at every sound. She deliberately came home from work late, hoping to avoid any more unsettling surprises. As she walked up to her apartment door, her heart sank. Taped to the door was a simple, red envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside wasn't a card. It was a key. A newly cut, shiny, brass key. And beneath it, a small, typed note. It was the first time her admirer had used words. It said, "So we don't have to be separated by a locked door anymore. Happy Valentine's Day. I'll see you tonight." Pure, ice-cold terror seized her. She fumbled with her own keys, her mind racing. Was this a key to his place? Or was it? She jammed her own key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. The key from the envelope was a key to her apartment. He had been inside. He had hired a locksmith. He had a key to her home, her sanctuary. She didn't scream. She was too scared to make a sound. She backed away slowly, pulled out her phone, and ran down the stairs, dialing 911 as she burst out onto the street. The police arrived within minutes. They used a master key to enter the apartment. It was empty, but the signs of intrusion were chilling. A single place setting was arranged on her small dining table. 2 wine glasses. A bottle of her favorite red wine, opened and breathing. He had been there, waiting. The investigation that followed revealed the admirer was a man from a different department at her company. A man she had barely spoken to, maybe exchanged a handful of pleasantries with at the coffee machine. He had developed a severe, delusional obsession with her, constructing an entire relationship in his mind. He confessed to following her for months, going through her trash to learn her habits, and even putting a keylogger on her work computer to read her private emails. He saw his actions not as criminal, but as the grandest romantic gesture of all time. These kinds of stories are what turn hopeful romantic gestures into scary Valentine's tales. Amelia had to move, change jobs, and lived in fear for years. All because of a love that existed only in her stalker's mind. Sometimes, the horror doesn't come from a twisted admirer. It comes from the terrifying randomness of the world and the brutal shattering of the one place you should feel the safest, your own home. This is what happened to Mark and Lisa on a snowy Valentine's night in their new house in a quiet, rural suburb. They had been married for 5 years and had just bought their dream home a few months prior. It was a bit isolated, surrounded by woods, which was exactly what they loved about it. For their Valentine's celebration, they decided to stay in. Lisa cooked a beautiful meal. They opened a bottle of expensive champagne, and they were curled up on the couch, watching a movie as a blizzard raged outside. It was perfect, cozy, safe, and filled with love. Around 10:30 p.m., there was a loud knock on the front door. They looked at each other, confused. They weren't expecting anyone. The snow was coming down so hard you couldn't even see the road. Mark muted the TV. The knocking came again, louder this time, more urgent. "Maybe someone's car broke down," Lisa whispered, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Mark went to the door and peered through the peephole, but it was frosted over. He called out, "Who is it?" A man's voice, rough and strained, answered back. "Sorry to bother you. My car slid off into the ditch just up the road. My phone's dead. Can I just come in for a minute to warm up and call a tow truck?" Mark hesitated. The story was plausible. It was a genuinely terrible night to be stranded. But something felt wrong. The voice was too forceful. He looked at Lisa, who shook her head subtly, her eyes wide with fear. Trusting their instincts, Mark called back through the door, "Sorry, man, I can't let you in. But I can call a tow truck for you. What's your name and what kind of car is it?" There was a moment of dead silence from the other side. Then, the man's voice changed completely. It was no longer pleading. It was filled with cold, hard rage. "Let me in the damn house, now." And then the doorknob began to rattle violently. Mark threw the deadbolt and backed away from the door, grabbing Lisa's hand and pulling her towards the back of the house. The rattling stopped and was replaced by a massive thud as the man threw his body against the door. And then another. And another. Suddenly, all the lights in the house went out. The man had cut the power. They were plunged into absolute darkness, the only sound being the howling wind and the rhythmic, terrifying thudding at their front door. Mark fumbled for his cell phone, his fingers shaking as he dialed 911. As he was whispering their address to the dispatcher, they heard a new sound that made their blood run cold, the shattering of glass from the kitchen at the back of the house. He was in. "He's in the house," Mark whispered frantically to the dispatcher. He broke a window. "We're going upstairs." They ran up the stairs as quietly as they could, their hearts pounding in their chests. They ducked into their bedroom and Mark locked the door, pushing a heavy dresser in front of it just as they heard heavy, crunching footsteps on the floor below them. The 911 operator was still on the line, telling them that police were en route, but the road conditions were making it slow going. They heard the footsteps slowly, methodically, coming up the stairs. They held their breath, huddled together in the pitch-black room. The footsteps stopped right outside their bedroom door. Silence. An agonizing, deafening silence that stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, the doorknob began to turn. Slowly, it jiggled against the lock. Then a fist pounded on the door, so hard the frame shook. "I know you're in there." The man's voice snarled. "You can't hide forever." He started throwing his shoulder against the bedroom door, the wood groaning in protest. Mark and Lisa could see the frame starting to splinter around the lock. They were trapped, with nothing but a flimsy piece of wood and a dresser between them and a violent intruder. It was a literal nightmare, a real-life Valentine's Day horror that they would never forget. Just as a large crack appeared in the door, they heard the distant but unmistakable sound of sirens. The pounding stopped. They heard the man curse, followed by the sound of him running back down the stairs. A few moments later, red and blue lights flashed through their window, painting the snowy landscape in terrifying colors. The police found the man trying to flee through the woods. He was an escaped convict from a nearby county, and their house was simply the first one he came across. It was a crime of pure, random opportunity. For Mark and Lisa, Valentine's Day would never again be a symbol of cozy safety. It would forever be the anniversary of the night a monster tried to break into their sanctuary. Our final story is a cautionary tale for the modern age of love. It takes place not in a physical house, but in the digital world where we so often seek connection. It's about a man named Greg, a 42-year-old architect who, after a difficult divorce, decided to try online dating. He was nervous, but hopeful. After a few weeks of swiping through profiles, he matched with a woman named Sophia. Her profile was stunning. She was a beautiful, dark-haired woman with a warm smile, who claimed to be an art curator who had just moved to his city from Italy. Her bio was witty and intelligent. She seemed perfect. They started messaging, and the connection was instant. They had the same sense of humor, loved the same obscure movies, and shared a passion for travel. Soon, they were texting all day and having long phone calls every night. Sophia's voice was charming, with a faint, lovely accent. Greg was completely smitten. He felt like he was a teenager again, falling in love for the first time. There was only one red flag. Sophia was always hesitant to video chat. She'd say her camera was broken, or the lighting was bad, or she felt self-conscious. Greg was disappointed, but he was so caught up in the romance that he let it slide. They made a plan to finally meet in person for a grand first date on Valentine's Day. Greg booked a table at one of the most romantic and expensive restaurants in the city. As the day drew closer, Sophia's messages became even more affectionate. But then, a week before their date, she sent him a text that seemed distressed. "Greg, my darling, something terrible has happened. My wallet was stolen, and my bank has frozen my cards while they investigate. I'm so embarrassed to ask, but I need to buy a dress for our date, and I have no way to pay my rent. Could you possibly help me out? I'll pay you back the second the bank sorts this out." Without a second thought, Greg wired her $2,000. He was in love, and he wanted to be her hero. A few days later, another request. Her mother in Italy had supposedly fallen ill, and she needed money for a last-minute plane ticket to see her after their Valentine's date. It was another $3,000. Greg's friends warned him, telling him this was a classic scam. But Greg refused to listen. He was defensive. "You don't know her like I do," he insisted. "Our connection is real." On Valentine's Day, Greg put on his best suit, a bouquet of roses sitting on the passenger seat of his car. He was nervous but incredibly excited. He got to the restaurant 15 minutes early and got their table. He texted Sophia, "I'm here. Can't wait to finally see you." Her reply came a minute later, "On my way." "See you soon, my love." Greg waited and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He sent a dozen texts. No reply. The restaurant was emptying out, and the sympathetic looks from the staff were humiliating. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, he accepted the crushing reality. She wasn't coming. Defeated, he drove home. As he walked into his empty apartment, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophia's number. But it wasn't an apology. It was a link to a news article. The headline read, "International romance scam ring busted. Used fake profiles to steal millions." The article featured a photo of the woman from Sophia's profile. Her real name was something else entirely, and she was a model from Eastern Europe whose photos had been stolen and used by the scammers for years. The Sophia he had fallen in love with wasn't a person. It was a team of professional criminals, likely men, operating out of a call center thousands of miles away. They had manipulated him, studied him, and bled him dry. Greg's experience is just one of thousands that make up the dark underbelly of modern dating. His story became another file in the ever-growing cabinet of online true crime stories. The horror wasn't just the loss of money. It was the complete and total violation of his trust and the realization that the entire relationship, every sweet word, every shared secret, was a calculated lie designed to exploit his loneliness. From a stalker's obsession, to a random home invasion, to a calculated digital deception. These three true stories remind us that vulnerability, the very thing that allows us to love, can also be what puts us in danger. They show how a day meant for celebrating love can be twisted by obsession, violence, and deceit into a day of unforgettable fear. So this Valentine's Day, while you celebrate with the ones you love, remember to stay safe, trust your instincts, and be aware that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones that disguise themselves as love. Thank you for joining me for this unsettling journey into the dark side of Valentine's Day. If you found these stories as chilling as I did and want to see more content that explores the intersection of the ordinary and the terrifying, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us immensely to keep telling these important stories. Stay safe out there